So this sculpture is called Impact Lens. It is an assemblage of 861 aluminum tubes. These tubes present an accumulation of sight lines. The sight lines converge at one point, and honestly, the camera right now is in that point. So from that single place, which is very similar to many artists' lifelong investigation of one-point perspective, these 861 tubes, they begin to deny their physical presence and present a vista to all the space around, but only from that one point. The idea of this sculpture in this exhibition is, as human beings, exactly how limited our perspective actually is. We have a very, very limited sense of sound, and in terms of what is audible to our senses, and through how we think, we have a very limited sense of perceiving things around us, unfortunately. This sculpture possibly conveys the idea of the observer, and that observer being observed constantly. These are the puddle paintings. They are precise constructions of paint, canvas, thread, wood, aluminum. The general working title, again, is a collective tug. This tug pulls on the canvas, it shapes the canvas. The paint is then a depiction of the strata and the structure, gravity, weight, the size of the particles that the paint is comprised of. They're careful constructions of color to have a relationship with this great hall, its architectural structures and the paintings that exist within it. One of the most important elements of the paintings is time, in that they're horizontal and the puddles are growing and shrinking. The puddles are drying. The paint is separating, and precise decisions are made to add small amounts of paint or gather all the paint and hurl it outwards, allowing it to pull back in. In relationship to all the work, there's a very specific existence between the structure and the mechanics of the piece and the optics of the piece. Part of the optics of these pieces is the fact that there's saturation, there's transparencies, there's tension on the canvas delivered by the threads, and how the paint reacts to that in the time span over its construction. In the next room, we're going to look at some thread paintings, some brand new ones, and it sort of pulls together this idea of the earth and our relationship on it. And I think that these paintings do that through the repetitive spherical strata, orb-like shapes that they permeate throughout the canvas. So what's happening with the thread paintings? That's a little different. The pieces above the fireplace, a pretty consistent strategy for the thread paintings of the last 5 years was to avoid any type of amplification, to avoid any type of cluster, composition, dominant color, pattern. to be void of all of that, to create solely an atmosphere, a atmosphere that exists on a pictorial plane that has everything to do with painting. So the pieces above the fireplace both are an example of that and a complete contrast to that. The other element that's happening in this room, and I have to add first, is this room is for me quite spectacular because I'm looking at Jacob Hashimoto's work on the opposing two walls, and it's been a relationship of many years between Jacob and I, and it's fabulous to see the work together in this space, with this light in this city, and on, with this ceiling. It's pretty spectacular. It's a great moment for this work. So with that said, the pictorial format and the atmosphere of painting and what that involves in the square or rectangular work, for me, has been completely altered by the iconic shape of the sphere, the illusion of the sphere, and what that might mean to us, whether it's a moon, a planet. I want these pieces to be somewhat destabilizing. So they offer new things. They offer a color on the front, surface, a color on the back, reflective panel. There's a texture on the front, there's a texture on the back of the reflector. And one of the main motives of constructing these objects, because I tend not to think of them as paintings as much as the square and rectangular ones, is I want to present an idea of the planet that we live on. Maybe this idea was really first considered when we went to the moon and looked back. I think we went there to see one thing, but perhaps we found a greater discovery of something else, which is the only planet that we live on, and an attention to that.